So in this video, I would like to explain U commands in Russian. U commands in Russian, also known as the imperative mood, uses the pronouns ty and vy, you and you all, by giving a command. In English, this concept is very simple because the form of the command is the same as the infinitive. In Russian, there's a bit of grammar to know because it is different than English, but it's not a difficult concept to understand, considering that there are only two forms of commands, ty and vy. Saying the pronouns is absolutely not needed because we'll automatically know that the command will always be in the second person. The command forms will also stay the same even when negative and reflexive, but when reflexive, only a few letters will be added, and I will explain that later. At first, it's important to know that most verbs that take a command form are imperfective because that is their dictionary form. It is possible to form commands with perfective verbs, but they're different in the first person, and I'll explain that at the end of the video. Considering the number of verb endings in Russian, like at, yat, it, yet, and so on, it may look like a lot, but in terms of commands, their forms are very simple. Let's begin with the ty command. Ty commands in Russian have two endings which follow different verb endings. With verbs ending in at and yat, we take an infinitive, drop the ending, and add the letter I kratkaya. With any other verb ending, like it and yet, we add the letter I instead. Let's have some examples. Работать, читать, слушать, думать, and гулять are all infinitives that end in at, with the last one ending in yat. To put them in the ty command, we drop their endings and put I краткая. Работай, work. Читай, read. Слушай, listen. Думай, think. Гуляй, take a walk. In the negative, the forms stay exactly the same, so that's the first ending for ty commands. For the second ending, we put the letter I if a verb ends in it, yet, or any other ending that's not at and yat. Let's have some examples. Говорить, ходить, купить, смотреть, сидеть. All of these are infinitives that end in it or yet, and to put them in the ty command, we drop their endings and put I. Говори, speak. Ходи, walk. Купи, buy. Смотри, look. Сиди, sit. In the negative, the forms stay exactly the same, so that's the second ending for ty commands. Generally, this is the grammar for ty commands, but there are exceptions that I'll explain later. Now, what happens when a verb is reflexive? When a verb is reflexive, we go back to the rule that holds every reflexive concept. We add s if a conjugation ends in a vowel, and sa if a conjugation ends in a consonant. And this rule applies to any reflexive concept, including commands. Considering that we have the endings I kratkaya and I, we add sa to the commands that end in I kratkaya and s to the commands that end in I. Let's have some examples. Купаться, одеваться, открываться, улыбаться, смеяться. All of these are reflexive infinitives, and to put them in the ty command, we add sa to the commands that end in I kratkaya and s to the commands that end in I. Купайся, take a bath or bathe yourself. Одевайся, dress up or dress yourself. Открывайся, open up. Улыбайся, smile. Смейся, laugh. In the negative, the forms stay exactly the same, so that's how reflexives work in the ty command. Let's continue with the vy command. Its formation is simpler than the ty command. To form the vy command, we take the ty command form and add the letters t regardless of the verb's ending, and that's it. All of these are infinitives, and to put them in the vy command, we first put them in the ty command, and then we add t. Работайте, читайте, слушайте, думайте, гуляйте, говорите, ходите, купите, смотрите, сидите. In the negatives, the forms stay exactly the same. Now, what happens when a verb is reflexive in the vy command? Just like the rule says, we add s if a conjugation ends in a vowel, and sa if a conjugation ends in a consonant. In the case of vy commands, the ending t always ends in ye, which is a vowel. Therefore, we automatically put the ending s. Купайтесь, одевайтесь, открывайтесь, улыбайтесь, смейтесь. In the negative, the forms stay exactly the same. So that's how vy commands work in Russian. As a side note, vy can be used as you all, but also acts as a polite and formal way to speak to people who are professionals. Suppose you learn Russian and you speak with these professional people, using these commands would be very useful. Now, let's move on to exceptions. In Russian, some commands have irregular spelling changes, but the good thing is that they stay the same even when negative and reflexive. The best way to understand them is to just remember them. And another good thing is that some exceptions end in the мягкий знак, so there is a pattern to follow with some of them. Готовь, готовьте. Ешь, ешьте. Сядь, сядьте. Будь, будьте. Забудь, забудьте. Встань, встаньте. Other exceptions can be fully irregular. Пей, пейте. Живи, живите. Иди, идите. Жди, ждите. There could be more exceptions, but these are the most common ones to know. And if you want to, you can try and put them in the negative and reflexive forms, if some verbs allow you to do so. Finally, at the beginning of the video, I said that it's possible to form commands with perfective verbs. And while that's true, I think it's a concept that is simple enough to understand. And if anything, it has the same function as in English. The commands that I'm talking about are we commands that begin with let's, like in the following commands. This command is practically the easiest both in English and Russian, so specific explanations are not needed here. In Russian, to form a we command, we have to rely on the verb давать and the verb from the perfective future, which is what I meant when I said that commands can be made with perfective verbs. In the case of we commands, perfective verbs are needed, but the action of let's will always be done in the future. All we have to do is modify давать into давайте and add a perfective verb in the мы pronoun in the future. Давайте is grammatically the same as the we command for the verb, but in the context of we commands, it acts as the word let's. Давайте. Давайте is used when talking to many people informally, but it has to be done in the first person, мы in the plural. Давайте поработаем. Let's work. Давайте поговорим. Let's speak. Давайте поедим. Let's eat. Давайте почитаем. Let's read. Давайте пойдем. Let's go. This is what I meant when I said that it's simple enough to understand, because it has the same function as in English, with any perfective verb. This is why I chose to simply show this command rather than make a separate video about it, so this is how we commands work in Russian as a bonus. And this is how commands work in Russian, also known as the imperative mood.